Hey, all you kids out there, welcome to 3 Feet High and Rising. How are you doing, contestants? I want to be on a game show so bad, it's unbelievable. Fellas, tell us a little bit about yourselves. Contestant number 1.
I never thought I'd make it into a hip-hop skit.
Okay, then. Contestant number 2. My favorite movie is Bloodsucking Freaks, and I want to win all the money. Okay, now that we've met our contestants, let's get to the game. I'm going to ask 4 questions, and you'll both try to answer them correctly. Okay, here we go. How many samples are there on De La Soul's first 2 albums? What semi-legendary 1960s band kick-started the sample wars and pissed all over the good time we were having back in the late 80s? Is Tommy Boy evil or just caught in the crossfire of the band's reckless early creative decision-making? How does a legacy rap act age gracefully into the 21st century? Before we give away the answers, we'll be right back with a message from our sponsor. Welcome to Discograffiti, the music podcast that delivers the objective truth about the entire discography of every single artist and band that ever existed.
I'm your co-host, Joe Kennedy. Welcome to the podcast this week. This was a fun one, Dave. I enjoyed this trial quite a lot. How did you feel about it?
I loved it. This one has a crazy arc to it. And, I was actually listening to this artist on hearing aids because I really wanted to preserve, especially for their sound, the bottom end.
You want to explain why you listen to music on hearing aids?
Because I own a pair, because I sell them. It's one of the 16,000 things that I do.
Well, there's a more specific reason, because you could just put in AirPods or something, but you like the stealth factor of the
I do. I like the idea that I can listen to music and be conjoined with whatever's going on around me. The only problem is with Discograffiti, I'm really trying to hone in on what's going on so I can, preserve my memories of the music. And so I'm nowhere near the current reality that I'm ensconced in.
Meaning you've got you don't want to hear outside world. You want to be
meaning I got into several arguments with my wife when she thought I was having a conversation with her. So then I started experimenting by just playing it out loud on my phone wherever I went. It's a trial by fire.
Well, this is a hip hop related trial.
It truly is.
You need that low end.
You do, and I was using molds.
You can't just listen on your
phone. I was
phone.
actually using molds, which completely occludes the ear canal. Mm-hmm. And
this is very fancy ear talk you're doing here.
It is. This is turned into an audiometric dissertation.
But you gotta have that. You gotta have that low end, man. You gotta get.
I recommend molds. Look, the current reality.
I recommend
anyway.
a pair of regular headphones.
I recommend total noise canceling headphones.
Well, I have the Bose Sound Sport ones, and those sound pretty good.
I'm getting noise canceling ear surgery next week.
Yeah, as long as you don't need to pretend that you're not listening to music. I think regular headphones is probably.
I'm going to stop pretending that I'm listening to people.
Right.
But Joe, I'm not going to pretend that I'm not listening to music. So anyway, the big reveal. Tonight's episode of Discograffiti will be turning our spray cans on De La Soul.
Right. Hip-hop's incorrectly labeled hippies, who then had to spend a lot of time shedding the hippie label, and then, had a spectacular run of records.
And became streaming service anathema.
Right.
So Joe, I know, where you were growing up, which was in Florida, right?
Yes, South Florida.
So I was in Jersey, and my friends, we honestly were not incredibly hip-hop centric, but at that point in the late 80s, early 90s, growing up as a 18-year-old, 19-year-old, De La Soul were it for me. I mean, that was the main thing hip-hop-wise for me.
Yeah, I first heard 3 Feet and Rising, their first record. I worked at a record store in 88 and 89, so I was 16, 17 years old. So I kind of remember every record that came out in those years.
What
pretty
was the most
specifically.
popular thing in the cutout bin at that time?
I don't know about in the cutout bin, but the one record that was played in the store incessantly was that Edie Brickell jam.
Okay, I like Little Miss S with a mini dress.
The first
living
little
it up
Edie
to
Brickell
die.
joint. I still know every note
The
of that
second
thing.
song is the only good song.
There's also this Waterboys record that was out then that people were hella into at that record shop. That was
I love
on
the
a lot.
idea that Paul Simon took her away from her career and snuffed out her candle of inspiration. That's what he was responsible for.
But I do remember this record being a big deal at the time, and I remember it really not sounding like anything else, and really standing out as something different.
I mean, it was the Wild West at that time, so you could pretty much do anything, get away with anything. You had the Hank Shockley cut-ups of Public Enemy. You had, basically James Brown's catalog being ransacked amongst Clinton's as well, and Sly's. You had De La Soul. You had Beastie Boys. Everybody was grabbing and ripping wherever they could, and that didn't last for long.
Yeah, De La Soul kind of beat everybody to the punch with the collage style of production. Public Enemy was doing it a bit, but they kind of would build up more of these sort of terrifying soundscapes, and it was a layering kind of thing. Where De La Soul's approach especially on the first three Prince Paul records,
they were
was
naked. It wasn't a blanket.
It was a collage kind of more style. And they basically beat Paul's Boutique to the punch, to the point where when the Beastie Boys heard 3 Feet High and Rising, they thought they might have to scrap Paul's Boutique and start from scratch because they got kind of beaten to that.
That I didn't know.
Yeah,
That's
they got
cool.
kind of beaten to that punch on that. So
yeah, that was definitely a Pet Sounds Revolver sort of a situation. First to the Zeitgeist wins the trophy. These guys came together in the Amityville area of Long Island in New York in 1988. So, for those who are unfamiliar with them, these guys at the time were the antidote to a pretty hardcore rap style that was happening. They were sort of the colorful, those really, really bright colored. It's an antidote.
Well,
to
I
that.
think a lot of that is sort of a misnomer, and that they felt that sort of right away. The way that that 3 Feet High and Rising, their debut album, was styled, the packaging and the videos really leaned into that, but the actual content of the music and their approach and what they are, that really wasn't a hippie thing at all. There's no let's all get together and love one another kind of, that's not really the message of the music. It's a lot more than that's a very reductive kind of way.
But I think it actually probably springs more from Prince Paul's production style. So Prince Paul was their producer on their first 3 records. These are, objectively their best known work, what they're known for, and I think the playfulness that lends itself to that quote unquote, the hippie vibe, comes from all the collage of his samples, the tapestry.
Yeah, and I think they were part of they were high school friends, and they formed in high school, made a single.
Paz the News, Trugoy, and Maceo.
Right. They made a single that kind of got noticed pretty quickly. They kind of rose up through the ranks fairly quickly, and they got Prince.
And that was Plug Tunin'.
Right, Plug Tunin'. That was their big breakthrough single. I think it came out as a 12-inch and kind of was a hit locally in New York City. And they were also part of a collective of rappers at the time, the Native Tongues Collective. The flagship artists were De La Soul and Tribe Called Quest, but then also
the Jungle Brothers, Queen Latifah,
right.
Black Sheep. I mean,
Lonely Love was another one in there. The Jungle Brothers were kind of the seminal artists there. They kind of made the first record. Their debut record, Straight Out of the Jungle, is the first one that that kind of seems to coin that Native Tongues sort of sound. It has a kind of scruffy bedroom kind of quality to it. It has the sort of trademark heady lyrics. It has a real charm to it. I like that record a lot.
In 1989, 3 Feet High and Rising comes out, and that's what do you think? You think that's the flagship album of the Native Tongues era?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was massive commercially because it had one big hit single on it. And
me, myself, and I, you remember, it was on the radio all
yeah, sure.
the
It was a
time.
heavy MTV rotation, which was kind of even better than being on the radio in those days. So yeah, they kind of achieved full saturation. I think they're still teenagers when that song was. I think they were all 19, maybe 20. when that song really took off and became
It was pretty
a big
massive
hit.
success right out of the gate. And then, pretty quickly after that, they got slapped with a lawsuit.
Yeah, this was the days where clearing samples was sort of a handshake agreement. You were supposed to still technically clear samples, but nobody really the legal part of clearing samples was still a little bit murky. There was not really an established kind of protocol. So on those early De La Soul albums, there's many dozens of samples. Some of them were in various states of being cleared or not cleared. They got permission for some. They got kind of handshake permission for others. Others, they didn't really get permission per se at all.
And this one particular track is called Transmitting Live from Mars. I would call it an interstitial track. It's not even really a song necessarily.
Yeah, it's kind of a little link track thing.
And it's two samples. It's an instructional, language instructional tape, and then over that is a composition that the Turtles recorded. That song is what they were sued over, the usage of that. It's a slowed down version of that track.
Right.
And that's why we can't have good things anymore.
Well, I mean, I suppose this was going to happen one way or another. That was kind of the lawsuit that kind of changed the direction of things a lot and created a lot of problems for De La Soul. But it was this problem that was going to need to be sorted out. It wasn't going to just be able to go on like that forever with that kind of Wild West of sampling era.
But before they were hit with that, the creative think tank of these three guys with their friend Prince Paul is just unbelievable. I mean, the sampling.
Well, if you don't have to worry about clearing samples, you have basically an infinite palette of things that you can use.
But you had a guy producing who knew what was cool. I mean, I'm discovering still almost to this day what some of these samples are. They're like landmines that blow up years later sometimes. But you got, Hall & Oates, Steely Dan, the Turtles, Johnny Cash, instructional language stuff, Sly and the Family stuff. It's all over the map.
Yeah.
All over the map.
So they were, So it was basically Flo and Eddie of the Turtles, their lawsuit. That was kind of the backbreaking lawsuit. On the one hand, some of the things they said at the time were kind of old farty. They were kind of like, sampling isn't creating music. It isn't, it's just stealing other people's work. I don't think they really got it. If they had maybe listened to this record and kind of tried to appreciate it.
And the funny thing is, their song was a cover of somebody else's song.
Right. It wasn't. It was the master that they owned, not the publishing on it.
Right.
But at the same time, I can see their argument. It's like you should probably try to clear a sample. You should probably, before you take something off somebody's record, you should probably try to make sure that they're cool with it, or
Well, I just wish they knew that eventually that music was going to be free, so it wouldn't matter. You might as well just make great records.
Now, also in their defense, Flo and Eddie were two of the most screwed over musicians by the industry. That's why they're called Flo and Eddie and not Mark Volman and Howard Kalin. They lost the rights to use their own names.
Oh, okay.
As the Turtles dissolved, so they had gotten very badly screwed over. This was not their first lawsuit.
Okay, all right. So now I'm conflicted, but in any sense, the music on the record on 3 Feet High and Rising is simply unreal. I mean, there's almost nothing on it that isn't like staggeringly incredible. Right from the get go. The reason why we opened the show with a skit. Is the first skit that was ever on a hip-hop record is at the head of this record.
That's right. They invented the hip-hop skit.
And it was a game show.
For better or worse.
That's right. That's right. And still, to this day, I have not heard better skits than De La Soul skits.
Yeah, they really worked them into the records.
Mainly this one and the next one.
Yeah, in a very organic way that's kind of key to the sequencing of the records.
But right off the bat, as soon as Magic Number hits with the descending bass line and the drums going batshit crazy.
Do you know what the drums are from?
What is that from?
It's The Crunge by Led Zeppelin.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah. Okay. The song is amazing. The songs keep coming. Joe, take it from here.
Well, I like to talk for a second about their process. So this is also at a time when they did this record for a very low budget. They had not very fancy samplers. And one of the ways they got around matching tempo and key of certain samples, that's one of the problems if you're sampling, is that if you're layering a sample on top of another sample, they're not necessarily in the same key.
Don't you just
So-
speed it up or slow it down?
You can speed up and slow it down, but now it's sped up. Now it may not sound like how it sounded
Chipmunky.
originally. Yeah, or yeah, exactly. So they got around this they had one key piece of gear. They had an Eventide harmonizer, which was kind of like it was a pitch shifter, pretty sophisticated for its time. People still use them today. But that allowed them to they used that in a very creative way to mix and match samples. So you can change with a harmonizer like that, you can change the pitch of a sample without changing the tempo. So if you want the I Can't Go for that sample, if you want it at the same tempo but the key doesn't work, you don't have to speed it up. You just change the pitch. So they use that in a very clever way, and they use that to get around a lot of problems that early sampling faced. Nowadays you just do it all on a computer, and it's very easy. But it was kind of a painstaking job to get samples like this to line up and be in key and things like that.
And you had like super cool samples, like on "Say No Go," they sample Sly and the Family Stone, but it's not like Everyday People or something that people would know. It's Crossword Puzzle,
right?
Which is an obscure song from High on You.
Yeah, they're also. It's not the records aren't just. The crate digging culture of the time is also. Prince Paul's a master crate digger. All of them really.
Like
I think they were all. And the three guys in the band
Change
as
and
well.
Speak. You had Simon's Bra, which is an amazing song, and it's something I discovered decades later.
Yeah, this is a masterpiece crate digging record.
It really is. I mean, and seriously, everything is incredible on it. Tread Water, Plug Tunin', Buddy, Me, Myself, and I, the single, obviously. I Can Do Anything, Daisy Age. There's really not a bad song on the whole
there's a
thing.
lot of content on the album. It's very dense. There's a lot of surprises in it. It's a rewarding repeat listens kind of album for sure. There's kind of always a new thing you're discovering in it, even many years later. Still, I feel that way.
It's an instant classic. When it came out, I knew I'd be listening to it and talking about it decades later. Definite 5 stars.
Yeah, this is a clear 5-star albums, 5-star record, and as of right now, it had been out of the culture for so many years. When music kind of switched over to the streaming model, it was unavailable because all those samples. Now that because streaming is a new format, it was a gray area.
They unwittingly fucked themselves.
Yeah, it was gray area whatever clearances they had gotten for CD when it initially came out. It was unclear if all of those were going to pertain also to the streaming platform. Is it technically a new platform or? So it was in a gray area, and I think it was Warner. Tommy Boy, their label, was distributed through Warner, and I think Warner didn't really want to open the can of worms.
Okay, so moving forward, a couple years later, they released an album called De La Soul is Dead. And on the cover of the album is a spilt pot of daisies with soil on the ground. And so right off the bat, that's Negation, which in the spirit of Sly and the Family Stone's riot, there's a riot going on. It seemed like immediately, okay, this is not only a great band, this is a very interesting band.
Yeah, I mean, the De La Soul, the 3 members of De La Soul, they're very much to me like they are always being themselves. They're not like huge, larger than life personalities. They're not like, they're just kind of regular guys. And they don't really take a stance of being like a character or some sort of larger than life thing. They're just kind of like it just comes across very natural who they are. They're secure in their own skin. They're not they're not like big into boasting or they're kind of a reaction.
I feel like
I think that's the part of hip hop they're reacting against.
I feel like they get less secure as their career goes on.
Yeah, I mean more
I'll
at
later.
this stage of their career.
At this stage, they're in total command. And what's always interesting to me is when a band starts with a sort of twist of the kaleidoscope on their own perspective of who they are as a band.
Yeah.
That's very interesting when it happens album by album by album.
I also think the hippie thing, I kind of alluded to it before. It got to be a drag for them real fast. It did not take
they
long
hated
for
it
that
immediately. Yeah.
And it was really nothing that came from their music so much. It was from the art direction mostly.
Exactly.
It's from the way they were styled.
Yeah.
And they famously played on Arsenio Hall at the time. At the time Three High and Rising came out, and Arsenio introduces them as introducing the hippies of hip hop, De La Soul. I mean, Arsenio Hall was like the tastemaker of the time. It's hard to believe, but he was. So, he was like the hip guy on TV at the time. So I think it just got extremely annoying and reductive to them. It is very reductive. They started getting treated like personally, like they were pushovers. They had to like kind of like fight some people over it. It was definitely and combined.
And there's definitely stuff on De La Soul is Dead that addresses that.
Yeah, they talk about it directly.
In Past the Peas, there's that line: Arsenio dissed us, but the crowd kept clapping.
Right, that's in reference. To
yeah. De La Soul is Dead to me is my favorite hip hop album of all time. To me, it's the most interesting. The samples are so on point. It's absolutely ridiculous. There's some songs that are just such a celebration of musical culture. I don't see it as theft or even appropriation. It's a celebration. It's a very long album. It's definitely overlong. But I don't even care the sprawl. It's kind of like the White Album. It just wouldn't be the same if you made it a single album, even though you're cutting away some of the dross. But
I'll tell you what I love about it. It feels like it's one of those records where it feels like you're going to a universe somewhere. Like it exists in its own kind of space, in its own kind of temporal sort of space. And it just feels like you're kind of in a neighborhood walking around, eavesdropping on conversation. There's a kind of slice of life quality to it. That is really
so much fun.
Yeah, it's very immersive. The sort of slice of life sort of style.
Let's talk about the highlights. Okay, so first of all, the intro, the skit. I still use the word cocksnot all these years later. The skit is the best skit in hip hop history, I believe.
Yeah, it's this one. There are some songs that are kind of like part song, part skit on this record, where they're kind of blurring the line of them. Like the Biddies in the BK Lounge segment.
But that's like one of the greatest hip hop. That's one of the greatest rap songs of all time.
Yeah, it
really
amazing.
is. The middle of that song. This is a great example of how much fun this fucking record is. In the middle of this awesome male-female diss track, there's a mid-song kazoo and diss breakdown. And then that whole Maceo what goes on coda. Maceo what goes on. Maceo what goes on. I don't know. Let's talk about Oodles of O's. Right? Talk about Hey Love, Peace Porridge. My favorite of all time by them is Roller Skating Jam named Saturdays.
Yeah, so that has a lot going on in it. That seems like that should have been a big smash hit single, and it kind of wasn't. That seemed like that had the potential to be like it's I think a superior and more interesting track to Me, Myself, and I.
I think it's their best song.
It has the one thing I love in it. It has what's called a baby scratch. The baby scratch is sort of like the first scratch you learn to do on a turntable. The baby scratch itself that's in Roller Skating Jam is such a hook.
Yeah.
It's the king of baby scratches.
That song is so incredible. It really is. And it is top heavy. I mean, the first half of the record is just loaded with classics.
The other thing that seemed, before we get off that track, the other thing that seems like complete alchemy to me, then I don't even know how they managed to pull it off, but the main loop section of Roller Skating Jam called Saturdays it's made of two samples that fit together just like such a perfect glove. It's the drum loop is from a Tower of Power record, and the kind of Fender Rhodes loop that goes with it. It's just hard to imagine that those came from two different sources because they fit together like so beautifully, so perfectly. But that's from a tune called Evil Vibrations by something called the Mighty Riders.
Never even heard of it.
It's just such a thing of beauty the way they work together, and the kind of magic that a master crate digger can create by finding those things that work well together.
To me, it all peaks here. I mean, when this came out, it was the only thing I listened to. I still listen to it. It's it's 30 years later, still listening to it, still thinking it's amazing, and still its vibe and its the feel of it is to me unique in hip hop history. Yeah,
there's one other tune I just have to mention because I love it so much, which is Afro Connections at a High Five in the Eye of the Hoodlum. It's their send up of gangster rap, and it's just right on the money. It's very funny. Paz's verse in that is just a tour de force. really, Mace even gets in on the action on this one. Mace, it's the two MCs are generally Posdnuos and Drew or the Dove, later known as Dave, which, by the way, is the best MC name of all time. Dave.
Yeah.
And it goes to show you that he chose the name Dave as his MC name, is that they're very comfortable with who they are. They're not trying to be anything else other than who they are. I love that he's just Dave. That's
I love that I'm just Dave. For this one, I'm
not that impressed that you're just Dave.
You're such a prick. All right.
But Afro Connections, Mace is the turntablist of the band, and he's a very skilled turntablist. He's kind of he doesn't get his due sometimes, but very deft on the turntables, and but he gets a nice verse in on Afro Connections as well.
This one, unquestionably 5 stars, and this gets my Best Album award. There's no question about it. This is a 5-star record.
Yeah, easy 5 stars for me too.
Make sure you go to discography.com because the playlist is going to be very heavily populated with tunes from 3 Feet High and Rising and De La Soul is Dead.
And I will say, in addition to our playlist, we're kind of plucking the gems off the playlist, but both of those albums, really the first 3 albums, really you should really give those a listen start to finish too, because they're masterpieces of sequencing. The way those records are sequenced is a really big part of the
magic. Just to do you a favor, because there's no reason why we shouldn't be your one-stop shop for all your music needs, we're going to put all 3 albums in their entirety on the playlist, and then just cherry pick thereafter.
Yep,
make it easy for you.
There you go.
So in 1993 we have Balloon Mind State, which is the last record that they did with Prince Paul, the producer. So this kind of marks, the end of an era. So this is 48 minutes long as opposed to 73 minutes long, which is what De La Soul is Dead was. And it has a very different vibe to it. It's got a thick, dense vibe, which for me is very pleasing to be ensconced in. Mm-hmm. In their catalog, it's got a unique feel to it.
Yeah. So De La Soul is Dead was not a commercial smash. It was sort of like, I think it was viewed as a disappointment commercially, kind of much like Paul's Boutique, where it's a record that's it's looked on now as a timeless classic, but it wasn't really appreciated that way at the time.
It was a dud.
Yeah,
Paul's Boutique was a failure.
So Balloon Mind State, when that comes out, it's in that sort of context where they've sort of had the debut album Breakthrough Smash, the second album, the even headier concept album, doesn't do as well. So Balloon Mind State's the third.
They were almost seen as like has-been-y at the time. I remember Balloon Mind State came out, there was no excitement behind it.
Right, that's true.
None. So, but I mean, looking over the track list, I mean, you got Eye Patch, Patty Duke. These are amazing songs. I Be Blowin'. Now we're entering into jazz territory.
Yeah. The Balloon Mind State is more conventional song oriented. It's not like the kind of like hallucinogenic world that you go into like the first 2 records. It's more of like a kind of a sequence of songs. But I feel like those songs, the couple bits in the middle, the Maceo Parker thing and Long Island Wilden, which is a Japanese rap group doing a freestyle. And then it segues into a live tape of the old school rapper Busy Bee. And then it kicks into kind of the next segment of the record. It seems like that kind of those are kind of essential little like link pieces.
And then the back part of the record has this really dense, naughty vibe to it. I Am I Be, which is a continuation of the jazz that they're mixing into the stew on I Be Blowin'. Mm-hmm. In the Woods is great. Break of Dawn has an amazing
was the lead single.
Smoky, it's got a great Smoky Quiet Storm sample.
Yeah,
to
it's
it.
a Michael Jackson flip in that too. That's one of their best songs. It's a great single, great hip hop
awesome.
single. Just sort of like
and Ego Trippin' Part 2 is awesome. This is a great record, very unfairly overlooked. There's really nothing that I would even skip on this. To me, it's on the same level as the first 2.
They're not really chasing the trends. I think they're just kind of happy to be who they are, and it feels like a very free kind of album where they're not really...
It feels like the creative think tank is overflowing with ideas still.
Yeah, I got to give one... there's one line in the song In the Woods. It's kind of deep in the record, that song. But it has sort of the line that kind of sums up where they're coming from more than anything else, which is "fuck being hard, Posdnuos is complicated."
I love it.
Yeah, I mean, would you rather be complicated than be like,
At
hard?
Yeah. At the time when I
I know
remember-
I'm much more complicated than I am hard.
Yeah, I like to think that I'm hard, but mainly that comes from just being complicated. But at the time, I was driving across country, my very first cross country trip, and I was in Phoenix, Arizona. And the day that Balloon Mind State came out, I was so excited. I went to the record store and bought the cassette of it, and I'll always associate it with that time.
That's right, we're old.
You're very old. All right, I give it an unquestionable 5 stars.
I gave this 4.5 because I feel like it's just a slight notch behind the first two, but 4.5 is still pretty damn good.
You're a very critical human being.
Well, we'll see about that.
Okay. So this is kind of the end of their classic era.
Yeah, so we haven't really talked too much about Prince Paul. Prince Paul is a little bit older than them. He produced their first 3 records. The members of De La Soul also had a lot of input on those records as well. But the sort of vision and style, those 3 records are kind of different from everything else they did after. There's a distinct
And they're different
kind of,
from each other, too.
yeah. There's a
Very
distinct kind of
different.
fingerprint on those. That's sort of the classic era, the
then
Prince Paul era.
the next year, they did that Judgment Night soundtrack, and they did that song "Fallen," which is awesome. To me, that's still part of their classic era.
Yeah, that's a good song.
It's groovy and funky as hell. Just for that song, I give that song 5 stars.
Yep, agree. 5 stars for that collab.
So then Prince Paul flies the coop. Okay, and then we
Well,
start.
what happened was they had started to make another record with Prince Paul. The Stakes is High was also going to be made with Prince Paul. He delivered some tracks to them, and they were like, "This isn't really quite right for what we're going for."
I feel embarrassed. I didn't know anything about this.
Yeah, so they ended up self-producing most of it. But the original intent
What
was to do
happened?
it.
Was there was a falling out then?
No, it wasn't even really a falling out. I think it was just strictly creatively. They didn't want to do another collage-y album. They didn't want to do another one in that style. And they just had something different in mind. I think Paul himself was like, maybe I'm not the right guy for this. I don't think there was any animosity or anything there.
I mean, so Stakes is High. When you take out the underpinnings and rip De La Soul down to the studs, which is, I mean, I'm guessing you would agree that that's what Stakes is High is. Let's take out the foundational underpinning and see if the raps can withstand, because there's all the melodies, all the fun, a lot of that is taken away. Stakes is High is a darker, more serious record.
Yeah, it's kind of a concept album. It's sort of the quintessential state of hip hop record, or it's giving the state of the genre at the time. 96 hip hop is at a pretty serious crossroads at this time. The major stars of gangster rap are fully ascendant. Tupac and Biggie are already the biggest thing in rap. Snoop and Dre have been on the scene for a long time now.
But there's a lot of proselytizing on this record, which is a turnoff for me because, when you look at records like De La Soul is Dead, there's so much fun in there. And I know, yes, they're not going to be everything to everybody every time out. But if I'm in the mood to listen to De La Soul, I don't want to hear something that's dark. Just as when I want to listen to the Stones, I don't reach for Dirty Work.
Yeah, well, it's not really that dark. This is again a case I think where they're being just being themselves. They had something they wanted to say. They had, they had this record definitely has kind of a mission statement to it. This is another one I think kind of gets misconstrued, where it was viewed as this is De La Soul taking a stand against gangster rap. But I don't think it's really quite that simple. It's sort of more taking a stand against the commercialization of rap in general,
right,
and the de-artifying of De La Soul are kind of traditionalists. They have great deference to hip hop history. I think it was important to them what hip hop would become, and I don't think they liked the direction they saw it going in.
On the first 3 records, every song basically was great. On this record, there's only 4 that I saw. I mean, unless you could think of any others, Super MCs is amazing. Long Island Degrees is awesome. It's So Easy Hot is awesome, and Sunshine is awesome. Those four will be on the discography.com De La Soul playlist.
I'm a big fan of the title track of the song "Stakes Is High." That's a Jay Dilla production. It's his only production on the record. It's oddly buried at it's like the 17th song on the album. This record also suffers from it's being a product of the overstuffed CD era.
Yeah.
It's 70 something minutes or something.
So many hip hop albums are going to be consigned to the consignment.
So many albums, period, from that time. That was the age of let's
it's spilling over now into playlists. I mean,
right. Well, it's come back now on playlists.
Yeah. This is a weak album.
No, I think there's a lot of good material. I like probably 6 to 8 songs on this. Maybe like half of it. I like the title track a lot.
Look, I'm just being critical here because at the time I was very let down. I mean, I'm buying this stuff and it's expensive, and I was let down. I give it 2.5 stars.
I like this album better than you. You could definitely cut 20, 25 minutes out of it and it would be a lot stronger. I give this 3.5 stars. I thought about my opinions on this record a lot. I probably put more thought into this, how this record made me feel than just about any of the other ones. I like it. It's a different kind of thing than the first 3, and I probably would not go to it for repeat listens as much, but I do find it to be of pretty good quality, but definitely over long. I'll say. So 3.5 for me.
So before we continue with their next record, just of note, Prince Paul started releasing records around this time. In 1996, he had a record that he released called Psychoanalysis, What Is It? And then 1999, he had this sprawling epic called A Prince Among Thieves. I mean, this thing is, I find it interminable. It's 77 minutes long. There's cameos by Kool Keith, Big Daddy Kane, Chubb Rock, Biz Markie, De La Soul, Exhibit, Chris Rock, RZA. It goes on and on. It's actually a concept album. I'm not even going to bother explaining the concept because it's very convoluted. But for our purposes, De La Soul guest on the song More Than You Know, which is probably my favorite tune on the record, and it is sampled for the Avalanche's This Flight Tonight. I give the album 2.5 stars. I know we're not rating Prince Paul, but 5 stars for the one De La Soul song.
Yeah, I kind of enjoyed it. The hip opera that we're discussing. The story was kind of actually sort of easy to follow, surprisingly, and there's some pretty funny bits in it. It's very long. It's a kind of a relic of a different era of the genre, but it's ambitious. The Kool Keith song is pretty great. He plays a character that's kind of like a manic weapons dealer, and it's always fun to hear what Keith is up to. It's very typically Kool Keith.
I found it was one of the most sprawling, overlong things I've ever heard. Not that it was terrible, but
the structure of it is it's like long skit then song, long skit then song. So it's kind of almost like a screenplay kind of thing. It's pretty interesting. The De La Soul song and it's cool. I feel like the De La tune and it's kind of like a 4-star song and it's like a 3-star album or something.
Yeah.
But
it's nice to see them towering over their context, which would soon not be the case whatsoever.
But I enjoyed the record more than I thought I would.
So then we move into really the lean years for them, right? Would you agree?
Yeah. So they're at this point. This is what, like 2000 or so.
2000. So
they signed a very long deal with Tommy Boy and owed Tommy Boy, I think, 3 more records at this point.
Yeah. So what they were going to do is have a trilogy of records, and it was going to be something called Art Official Intelligence. So let's first talk about that title, because I have a problem with titles like that. Paul Westerberg is really adamant about having titles like that, where he does like cutesy, clever, coy play on words.
He's a punster.
Suicane gratification, and all shook down, and Art Official Intelligence. First off, not a fan of the title because every single one of these has a colon than another title. So,
well, there's only 2 of them.
There's only two. It was
Every
supposed
single
to be
one of them,
three.
too.
It was supposed to be three, and they kind of go with the concept at the beginning of three.
Well, the tell on these records is that they wanted to do all three in 1 year. They wanted to release them all
Like
in
Back
1
to
year.
the Future.
Yeah, and the third one was going to be a Maceo like turntable record. It seems like to me they were trying to run out the contract.
You think so?
I think so. You're going to put out 3 albums in a year. Like that's normally you put out an album, you tour on it. You put out an album, you tour on it. This seems like they wanted out of. And I know they did want out of the contract with Tommy Boy.
I'll tell you for me. So
They had a lot of tension with Tommy Boy, who always wanted like big commercial hits from them.
The first thing I noticed when I went to, because I went to the record store and bought this thing, I remember where it was. I remember where it was when I listened to it, etc. And first thing I noticed was, holy shit, there's tons of guests on this album.
Yeah, that was that was the trend kind of at the time.
In the past, it was just like a closed-off think tank, and it was kind of about their friendship and the inclusiveness, about their in-jokes. And now you got Redman, you got Exhibit, Busta Rhymes, Mike D and Ad Rock from the Beastie Boys, Shaka Khan, and many others. So then I put on the CD, and first of all, the album is the album cover is very imposing looking. It's not inviting, and immediately when I put it on, there's these super plain Jane raps without interesting music to carry it along. I immediately gave up on them. I knew that they were, for me, finished as an ongoing concern where I would buy their albums.
Yeah, well, the tracks, you kind of separate it into two things. The tracks they're long gone are the kaleidoscopic, dusty groove samples of the first 3 records. Even the sort of lean, kind of harder street beats from Stakes is High are more interesting. This has a very kind of pristine, like cold kind of sound to it. It sounds like a lot of the songs are built around little like motifs that are played on kind of keyboard presets. Like it doesn't sound like there's not like a lot of cool samples that you spot on these.
They actually sound absent. They sound like they're not on the record. And there's no songs. There's only tracks.
Yeah, there's a lot of canned kind of sounds on this, I feel like.
I don't know what the F happened to them.
Also, I feel like these are kind of like these are just sort of like workman-like genre albums. This is like sort of if you picked a like just representative off-the-shelf kind of generic hip-hop record from 2000, the production would be similar.
And I got to say,
They're not shooting for innovation on this.
They're definitely not. I mean, they're really falling back. It's a regressive album.
It's very long, 66 minutes, this one.
And I don't know about you. For me, not one standout track.
There are a couple things I do like. One is sort of a link track kind of tune, Words from the Chief Rocker, which has my favorite cameo on it, the old school Bronx rapper, Busy B. He sounds great on here. Kind of like that tune. And I like the single, which is a Prince Paul production, Ooh. Ooh, 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 ooh.
Yeah, not a fan.
That song has some flavor to it. That one avoids the pitfall of having the bad, like canned kind of sounds. That one seems like it's built around samples. That kind of has a little bit more of their old flavor kind of to it. But
for the purposes of this trawl, just to be, make sure that I felt this way about it. I listened to it over and over again because I wanted to make sure that I felt this way about it. I hate this album. I give it 0 stars. It's their worst album. I think it's a total blight on their career.
I kind of have a different concept of what constitutes a 0-star album. It has to be like this. It sort of has a base level kind of competence to it. It's not like by their own standards. Yes, it's nothing like their best work, but it's kind of like a workman-like genre album. It's kind of like it would be fine if somebody else kind of put it out. Like I give it 2 stars.
To me, it's a total regression from what I like about them.
Yeah, but if you're grading it on the curve of them, I guess it's compared 0. But I think as a general album, like it's kind of just it's like a genre album. There's also there's another, if you're a Jay Dilla completist, that's one of the other highlights, although it's not really even a very great song, Through Your City. Kind of has it's kind of has like an off kilter sort of Dilla beat to it.
Okay, so moving on to the next year, they farted out a sequel to that record.
It was made at the same time. Also, they were kind of
Okay.
making all this stuff at the same time.
So it was a Back to the Future 1, 2, and 3 deal.
Yeah.
And this one is, would you say Back to the Future 2? I would say Back to the Future 2. Mosaic Thump is Back to the Future 3. Okay, so
there's not a whole lot of difference between these two to me. They were working on them at the same time.
it's a little better.
You could kind of put them in shuffle, and you wouldn't notice when one came on or the other, really.
Here's the difference to me. There's not one thing that I would pull out of Mosaic Thump to put on discograffiti.com on the playlist. And Bionics, the sequel, has a few things that I would put in there, albeit it's not a great record. Artificial Intelligence Bionics was the second in the planned trilogy. To me, I don't get it. So they were growing and metamorphosizing and changing as a unit, and then suddenly they just stopped sounding like themselves altogether.
Well, I don't know. There's not really any like lyrical conceit to this. There's no concept of and you don't always have to do that. That's not something you always kind of have to do. We're kind of used to getting kind of big statements from them. I mean, maybe it's hard to make big statements like that so many times. This seems like very much the same kind of thing as the last one. It's kind of a collection of hip hop tunes. Nothing really much more than that. There's a couple things on here I like. The song with the wonderful Christmas time flip called Simply.
Simply is great.
That kind of has a fun, goofy kind of.
Simply is really cool. That's
like
the one.
Wonderful
thing
Christmas Time is the most exquisitely annoying song ever, but they make it kind of sound appealing.
And then the song after Simply is an interstitial track called Simply Havin',
right?
And that's great. So you'll find both of those on the playlist for sure at discograffiti.com.
There's also kind of a cool oddball novelty track, Peer Pressure. That is also a Jay Dilla production, and the song, it's basically Be Real from Cypress Hill peer pressuring our heroes, our De La heroes, into smoking weed.
It sounds like they're in the control room smoking weed while their guest stars are running the show. That's really what it sounds like.
I do kind of like that one.
I mean, it's kind of a bland party record, but it's not as offensive to me as the Mosaic Thump. I would give this one 1.5 stars.
I also gave this 2, the same as I gave Mosaic Thump. I find them kind of indistinguishable.
So that really was the Sahara for them. They kind of come out of the Sahara, but now they're kind of this is like an outcome potential for a unit that continues staying together, producing music after they've had crazy high creative career peaks.
Yeah.
It's like if the Beatles stayed together throughout the 70s and 80s. So, now it's 2004. Instead of releasing the third in the trilogy, it's an album called The Grind Date.
Yeah, this was not from the same sessions. They had scrapped the proposed third album in the Artificial series. That was going to be the Maceo Turntablist album. And then they set out making this one that it was going to be part 3 of Artificial Intelligence. But I think when they got into it, I think they realized they had something a little different. This is a pretty good comeback, I think.
It's a good record. It's a notably brisker and leaner work than their previous albums. Lighter guest appearances, a total of 4 guest MCs, and unlike every De La Soul album before it, there's no skits.
Yeah, this one might not be a home run, but it's a solid double off the wall. I think it starts off, the first 2/3 of it are really strong, and then it kind of tails off to me. But I like almost everything that's on the upfront part of the record.
You and I agree on the standout track. It's the Ghostface track.
That's
He
great.
Comes.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, Ghostface is one of my favorite MCs of all time. If I ever met Ghostface, I would probably just like break down in tears. I find him like endlessly awesome and inspiring. He's great on this.
RZA.
I met Raekwon once. I was pretty intimidated. I wanted to tell him how much I love him, but
what do you say?
I couldn't.
What do you
really.
say?
I just kind of waved and was like, "Nice to meet you." I was dying inside.
So this is actually their last official album for 13 years.
Yeah, this has some cool samples on it. It has a sample from Tales from Topographic Oceans. Did you know that?
Does it really? No,
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So the title track, The Grind Date, is based mostly around a sample from Tales, the unlistenable Yes album, Tales from Topographic Oceans.
Okay, it just gained a half a star for that.
Yeah, you can hear John Anderson's voice very clearly. La da 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 da, la da da da.
Nice, I got to go back.
And then there's another song, Verbal Clap. It's a Jay Dilla track that samples The Six Wives of Henry VIII by Rick Wakeman. It samples the synth off of that.
Nice.
And that is also just a really good, weird, oddball Dilla production. The leadoff track, The Future, that was produced by Super Dave West, who sort of becomes a pretty key player. He's kind of becomes their main producer. He did some work on the previous album on Bionics, but then he produces a bunch on this, and he did a lot of good work for them. He's kind of a key player in the rest of their run. But I love that first song, The Future. That sounds very very De La Soul-ish to me.
What do you give this one?
I give this 3.5 stars.
I give it 3. Mm-hmm. We're about on the same page.
Yeah.
This is a good one. It's not a great one, but at least you can tell. All right, they're back on track.
This is sort of a style that I like for them. It's sort of they're back to some creative sampling. There's kind of a lot of color on the album. It's not so kind of monochromatic like the previous few that they had made.
The last 2 were very monochromatic.
And there's kind of a fun factor to this one that had been missing from their work for a while. I lament that they didn't continue in this vein for a while after that. They kind of went into almost sort of not almost. They went into basically a hiatus for quite a while.
They did, but they were still producing music.
They're still making stuff, yeah.
And one of their biggest hits came that next year.
Right,
you have,
right.
They guested on the Gorillaz' "Feel Good Inc." Which was a massive hit. Honestly, not my cup of tea, but it was a massive hit. I'm happy for them. I give that song 2 stars.
Also, not kind of really my thing. I listened to it again. I hadn't heard it in quite a while, and I was like, oh yeah, this ain't bad. That's more like a 3-star kind of thing for me. But yeah, in general, not really my kind of. It's sort of like a song you'd hear on K-Rock or something, kind of like a rock radio song.
Yeah, it's not really De La Soul. They're just utilized.
Yeah.
And then in 2006, you have an album called The Impossible Mission TV Series Part 1, which is one of the most heavily labored titles that ever was. It's an album of unreleased material.
It's odds and sods.
Odds and sods. It dates back to De La Soul is Dead. If you're using art official intelligence as a sliding scale criteria, it's a classic. But otherwise, it's kind of just a serviceable smattering of tossed off raps. There's nothing that really stands out here. Nothing on the playlist. For diehards only, 2.5 stars.
Well, there are 3 tracks on this that may be of interest to you. They are outtakes from the classic era. They're all called. It's the What the Fuck series. There's What the Fuck 1, What the Fuck 2, and What the Fuck 3. One of them is De La Soul is Dead era that heavily samples Soul Man. Another one's from Balloon Mind State era. Those are, if you're huge fans of those records, like we are, those are kind of worth giving a spin. I think probably aren't going to make the cut of the playlist. I might put What the Fuck 2 on the playlist.
Hey, you know what? If you want it on, it's on.
I might have to veto you.
You have it in.
Right.
It's okay. You don't have to veto
All right,
me.
okay.
If you want it in, it's in. All right. So then 3 years go by after a fucking album of outtakes.
By the way, I give that one 2.5.
2.5?
Yeah.
Me too.
Okay.
We're right on point there.
Yeah.
So 3 years go by. Then they release a mixtape called Are You In? Do you understand the title, the pun?
Yeah.
Are You In?
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Are You In? Nike plus original run. Now we're getting into an era of very heavily labored titles. But this is an iTunes exclusive mixtape that's supposed to be just like one track for running. So I was a runner for a while. And I got to say, the thing about Are You In is that it picks up about 12 minutes in. But the first 12 minutes, it's a slow burn. And then at 19 minutes, it really kicks in. I've run 3 marathons. 19 minutes in is about the first time I can imagine running to this music that they've made. Then at 21 minutes, it kicks into this scathing scissor lock groove that transitions back and forth with a cosmic jazz guitar breakdown.
Yeah,
that shit's amazing.
Yeah, I acquired this album to listen to for this podcast in a format that had the tracks broken up. So
nice.
that one is called Pick Up the Pace, and that one is really pretty dope.
So that's probably what we
if there's a way to put that one on the playlist, that's worth.
We got to put this on the playlist
worth
because
on there.
The second half of Are You In is amazing.
Yeah, it's that song in particular is kind of a new sound for them. It's kind of this blown out, distorted kind of thing. That one's very cool. The rest of the record is, kind of like you were saying, it has kind of a rough quality to it. It's kind of has like an unfinished kind of mixtape thing to it. I like that one, and there's another one on mine, the one that had the tracks broken up. It's called We OD. It's kind of like a robotic funk sort of thing. There's some cool stuff. You're right, in the back end of that. In the back end of that,
you got to be
mixtape.
patient with this one, but the gems will reveal themselves to you. It's worth the listen.
Yeah, I mean these are records that I had no idea existed. Until
they were flying under the radar
until we did
many
this.
years.
Until we did the research for this episode. I was not really aware that they were still even working in that period.
Yeah, they had an album of unreleased material, and then 3 years later, a mixtape. So, then next year, they did another song with the Gorillaz that was not as huge, but in my opinion, much better, called Super Fast Jellyfish. It's kind of more loose-limbed and just more fun than Feel Good Inc. It has a great, awesome, sunshiny chorus to it. This one I give 5 stars. I love this song.
That's a good song. I gave it 4, but yeah, it's good.
All right, so 2 years later, there's an album called Plug 1 and Plug 2 Present ... First Serve. Again, with the overlabored titles.
Hey, they're paring it back a little.
Just a tiny bit. So this is...
Plug 1 and Plug 2, we have not mentioned, are the alter ego or the nom de rap of Dave and Paz de Neus. Other order. I think Paz de Neus is Plug 1, right? I think so.
Dave is Plug 2.
I think so, yes.
So this is in collaboration with a French DJ duo called Chocolate and Khalid.
Also, Maceo not on this one.
This is a concept album as well, and they're playing other rappers, often quoting De La Soul as an influence, describing De La Soul from a distance. It's weird. It's a kind of a weird side project. There's a couple decent tracks on it, but it is the opposite of a major work.
Yeah, this feels pretty low stakes. It has a sort of it's long. It's 68 minutes.
It's really not worth hearing. There's nothing on it that I would put on the playlist.
This is probably my least favorite one of the whole deal.
It's your worst album award?
This is my worst album award.
What do you give it?
I give it 1.5.
Okay, that's pretty low. I give it 2.5. I didn't find it offensively bad. At least they're trying with a concept. I'm always a sucker for a good concept, although there's no good concept.
I would describe it as a half-baked concept.
That's being very
generous.
In
fact, that's exactly what it says in my notes.
So 2 years later, we have a mixtape called Smell the Daisy, featuring unreleased Dilla beats and reworked lyrics from De La's catalog. This is kind of a weird record. We were talking about this on the way over. It's a bunch of their old songs that are then laid on Dilla beats and kind of recasted, but not in an extremely interesting way, just as a Valentine to Dilla. It's a good record, I think. I think I like it better than you, Joe.
This seemed like a missed opportunity to me because some of Dilla's beats on this are really amazing. There's some really nice productions on this. I wish they had just written new rhymes for it. I wish they had just kind of written new songs. It's a little awkward. They're kind of plugging in some of their classic lyrics,
Ego
some of the
Trip,
classic verses.
Roller Skating Jam named Saturdays, Oodles of O's, The Magic Number. These songs are all utilized on this.
The tracks are so good on this. This did seem like kind of a missed opportunity. Like I think this could have been more than what it was. Some of there's a tune called Dilla Plugged In. It has that great unquantized, rough and ragged. But insanely funky and human sounding Dilla samples. I mean, that's really Dilla's magic, is that he uses samples in a way that sound like very human. just the way he puts beats together, things are just a little bit off kilter, just have a little bit of that extra kind of lean to them. There's a bunch of them here. Vocabulary Spills, that's another really cool one with a really distinct kind of funk to it. Oh Shut Up is another one. Kind of has like that Soulquarians kind of sound, really super exaggerated swing. No More, No Less. That's another one. It has this
That's the magic number.
Yeah, it has that great kind of bubbly delay happening. It's just really cool.
This record is kind of crucial because here's the thing: the tent poles that keep one's interest alive in De La Soul post Balloon Mind State are the Grind Date, the Nike mixtape, and Smell the Daisy. That has to keep your interest until the year 2016.
Right. Yeah, I like this. It was in a way a pleasant surprise. It's like, oh man, there's all this quality Dilla stuff on here, but it was a little bit disappointing.
It is.
I give it 3 stars.
I give it 3 stars as well, but it's a solid record nonetheless. In 2016, you had an EP release that was really just kind of the drum roll for the album itself. The EP, let's talk about that first, Joe. For Your Pain and Suffering. So. Ultimately, this was just a teaser. I give this 1.5 stars. So, do you agree or?
Yes.
Okay.
I gave it 2, but yeah, 1.5, 2. It's down in that kind of range. It's not essential really.
So,
but they soon make some big noise with their next.
Seriously. So, first of all, why don't you talk about the Kickstarter campaign?
So this comes at a time in their career where their absence off the streaming services is really kind of starting to diminish their impact in the culture. You can't really get their records. So I mean, you can at the time you could get them illegally off file sharing services, which we do not recommend.
That's a terrible thing to do.
But so they, I think they were still touring, but it was the just not being able to really.
Have you ever seen them live?
I have not.
I did.
I've never seen
in
them
1996. I saw them at the Tibetan Freedom Festival. Stakes is High.
Oh, wait a minute! I was there with you, so I must have. It made quite an impression on me. Anyway, so yeah, they're kind of at it's like their legacy is kind of starting to fade away because streaming is becoming the thing that's how young people are listening to music. That's how people in general are listening to music. And they're not, the classic albums are not on the streaming services. And
also, there's not any kind of reverence toward the history, toward cultural history in this generation.
Right.
So they really do fade away.
Yeah. So they started a Kickstarter to make their next record. And they raised, I don't know, something like $135,000 in a week. And then by the end of the Kickstarter project, they had raised a whopping $600,000.
That's nuts.
So let me tell you, nobody's at this time is going to be giving.
That's like the Chinese democracy of hip hop.
Nobody is giving anybody $600,000 to make records anymore. I mean, I don't know, maybe like Taylor Swift gets like $600,000. That's a eye popping budget. So
I don't think when she travels out into the woods to hang out with Aaron Dessner that she gets that kind of money.
So it's they raised all the money. They spent quite a lot of time making it, and it's very lush. They spent a lot of it on lush string arrangements, beautiful horns, very full instrumentation. This is a different kind of record from them. This was done mostly as a full band project.
Everything on this album is fucking amazing, which is crazy because it has been 23 years since they've made a great album at this point.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is they really fully pull it off. So they're in a totally new format, working with live musicians mostly. Some of the musicians on this record are friends and colleagues of mine. The bass player is kind of Kaveh Rastegar. Worked with Kaveh in a bunch of different projects, and he's like an old friend. He's a very key player on this. Plays some great bass lines. Percussionist Davey Chegwidden. I've worked with Davey a bunch. Josh Lopez, guitar player. We played together in Macy Gray's band.
It's still playful, like their classic records. It's like their most playful record since Balloon Mind State.
Yep.
But there's also seriousness underpinning it.
It's a very mature work.
Yeah, I'd like to quote. There's a spoken word thing that comes at the head of the record, and I just want to quote one part of it. When do you think it's time to love something the most? When it's successful? It's when it's reached its lowest and you don't believe in it anymore. It's when nobody cares. That's right, nobody. So they're addressing their absence of an audience. They're connecting with the fact that they've been out in the Sahara for a long time.
On the one hand, yes, they were kind of out in the wilderness. They had kind of been forgotten, but then they go to do this project and they raise all that money. So there are people that want to hear them.
Right.
That's a massively successful Kickstarter project.
There's literally not a bad song on the entire album.
There's a real kind of generous spirit to the record. There's a lot on there. There's the thing I really like about it that kind of harkens back to their old work is that you get a lot of curveballs.
Right.
They could get in when they're from Stakes is High, and then for a good while after that, you weren't getting those kind of like sonic curveballs. There's this that where you didn't get that feeling that anything could happen on a record, which you really do on this one.
They were masters of the creation of the self-contained universe, and
it's
that's
back
been lacking
this,
since Balloon Mind State, and here we go
they,
again.
They definitely recreated that on this record.
It's an amazing world to enter into. It's very playful. It's a long record, but it's deserving of its length. I was aware of this record when it came out, but I only listened to it for the sake of Discog Graffiti, and I couldn't believe how good it was.
Yeah, the string arrangements on this are really beautiful. They're mostly done by a really interesting guy who I was not aware of before we did this, but his name is Maurice Hurd. He's from Detroit, and he's kind of this interesting, like, musical polymath kind of guy who's done a bunch of different kinds of things over his career, but a really lovely. These are all none of these strings are sampled. These are all charts that were written and played by little small string sections. Really beautiful. A lot of the string stuff.
I love this album. I definitely give it 5 stars.
I gave this 4.5.
Ouch.
There's a few things that don't completely click for me. I don't really like the metal one, the Justin.
Yeah, the Justin Hawkins one.
That one's I'm not really that into that one.
I get it, but you got to admire them for the daring behind that one.
Look, again, 4.5.
It's fucking
that ain't bad,
dude. Prog rap.
Yeah,
come on.
Yeah, I mean the Drawn. That's another incredible, beautiful song. It's kind of built around this. It's kind of built around the spine of this like a little plucked arpeggio figure, and there's the atmosphere. It's really beautiful production.
So what's crazy?
This is a really inspired album.
It is, and what's crazy to me is now it's 2021, soon to be 2022, and it's 5 years since they've had a record. They have come out with. They've guested on 2 songs in 2019, so it's like that. Which is Carl Thomas, whoever the fuck that is. That one I give 3.5 stars.
You give that 4. I like that song.
And then, more importantly, in 2019 as well, DJ Shadow, off his album Our Pathetic Age, came out with a song called Rocket Fuel, which is a sick tune, their best single in years, and yet again proving with the right producer, these guys' collective mojo can still be unlocked. I give that song 5 stars.
That's 5 stars for me too. I would love to hear them do more stuff with Shadow.
But that brings us up to date. That's it. I mean, it's been 5 years since their last album. It was an amazing record. I'm fully on board as a fan of De La Soul again because I'm convinced they can still kick me in the nuts with their beautiful soundscapes.
Yeah, I mean, longevity is a tough thing in any genre. Hip hop's no exception.
So now we do our top 3 records. Joe, what would yours be?
Well, I have a feeling these are probably going to be the same for us. Do we count these down backwards?
We can definitely do that.
We'll do it backwards. At number 3, I have Balloon Mind State.
Me too.
Number 2, I have 3 Feet High and Rising.
Holy shit, me too.
Do I stop and do a long distance dedication here, or do I just go on to number 1?
Do whatever you'd like. Look into your heart.
Okay. Number 1 is De La Soul is Dead.
I have the same top 3 as you, my friend. What's your least favorite record? It's that plug 1, plug 2 thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I'd say that one I scored the lowest, and I had the least amount of good time listening to. So yeah, I'd rank that one as the lowest. Again, it's sort of a mixtape, low stakes kind of thing. So
So anyway, go to discoggraffiti.com. Make sure that you check out our playlist concurrently, because this is the best way to ingest the music that comes from these artists. It's all there for you, pre-plucked, so you don't have to do the dirty work.
Some bonus stuff there in the show notes. We're going to link to a couple of good articles, some YouTube videos. It'd maybe some extra reading and viewing if you want to dive even deeper than this.
Make sure you follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And definitely, we have a ton of upcoming episodes that are going to be very exciting. So tune in next Monday, or better yet, immediately, because we do best on binge listening.
Yeah, binge it all.
We'll see you next time
on Discography.